All right. Welcome to the National Transportation Safety Board. I'm Jennifer Homendy, and I'm honored to serve as chairwoman of the NTSB. I'm joined by my fellow board members, Member Michael Graham, Member Todd Inman, and Member Tom Chapman. Before we begin, I'm going to yield 1 minute to Member Chapman.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak briefly, Chair. I'm going to excuse myself from today's proceedings as I did prior to last summer's investigative hearing. Before doing so, I want to again explain why I will not be participating. As I have formally disclosed in various public financial disclosure filings, my family and I continue to receive flight privileges from American Airlines pursuant to what's called an executive change in control and severance benefits agreement. Without going into details, that's an arrangement which dates to a circumstance and time much earlier in my professional career. American Airlines is not a formal party to the investigation. However, I have recused myself from participation in this investigation because of the business and corporate relationship between American Airlines and PSA Airlines, and PSA is a party, of course. I commend our team and my colleagues on the board for their hard work. I've followed the investigation closely, and I'll be observing today's board meeting by video. A thorough determination and examination of the facts is owed to those who lost their lives in this terrible tragedy, and to their loved ones who are grieving the unimaginable loss. I know that some of the folks are here today, and others are undoubtedly watching online. My heart goes out to you. I am confident the lessons learned from this investigation will help ensure such a tragedy can never be repeated. And Chair, that concludes my remarks. My thanks again for the opportunity to explain my situation.
Thank you, Member Chapman. Today's meeting is open to the public in accordance with the Government and the Sunshine Act. It's the first time board members and staff have come together to discuss the draft report and to consider the proposed findings, probable cause, and safety recommendations. Before I continue, I want to pause for a safety video. Olivia?
Hello, and welcome to the NTSB Boardroom. Before we get started with today's meeting, I'd like to quickly walk you through our emergency procedures. First things first, please take a moment to silence your phones or other electronic devices. If you need the restroom, they're just outside the boardroom on the left side of the lobby. If someone experiences a medical emergency, our on-site Federal Protective Service officers are trained to respond. They'll call 911, perform CPR if needed, and use the automated external defibrillator device mounted in the lobby between the boardroom exit doors. They're also trained to provide first aid. There's a first aid kit at the security desk in the lobby. If we're asked to shelter in place, like during severe weather or a security incident, please stay seated and listen for instructions. Our security team will manage the situation and let us know when it's safe to leave. If the fire alarm sounds, please follow NTSB staff to the nearest exit. There are two main options. You can exit via the stairs next to the stage, or you can exit the same way you came in through the lobby. Please walk, don't run. Once outside, you'll be directed to an assembly area. Stay there until we're clear to come back inside. If there's a small fire, our security officers are trained to respond using one of the fire extinguishers. You'll find them in 3 locations.
Before I continue on with my opening statement, I'll yield 2 minutes to Member Graham.
Thank you, Chair. Today is a heavy day, and I do not think that is lost on any of us. This has been an incredibly difficult year for our agency and our investigators, the first responders to this accident, and the aviation community as a whole, as we have mourned the loss of 67 lives nearly 1 year ago from an accident and tragedy that never, ever should have happened. As difficult as this year has been for so many, though, I know it has been most difficult for the family and friends who lost loved ones in this accident. Whether you're here today with us or online or watching at a later date, please know that I, my fellow board members, and our entire agency mean it when we say we have not let a day go by when we are not thinking about your loved ones. They have been on our minds and in our hearts in each and every step of this process. Our investigation has been a grueling and challenging process, but I cannot imagine having to endure all of this in the eyes of the public. I will continue to pray for each and every one of you. I imagine there will be some difficult moments today for all of us as we try to provide answers to how a multitude of errors led to this tragedy. There will be some times where individual errors may be noted throughout the course of the day in relation to this accident, but I want to make it crystal clear. Any individual shortcomings were set up for failure by the systems around them. We are not here today to place blame on any individual or any organization, but we are here to ensure those systems that failed to protect 67 people on January 29, 2025, never fail again. To that end, I remain steadfast in my commitment to forcefully advocate for all the safety recommendations we adopt today moving forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Excellent statement. And I do want to point out this was, as I said at the initial press conference, an all hands on deck investigation and on-scene work. Member Graham, I know that you were there. You met with families, some of which are from your home. So thank you very much for your work. Now I want to yield a couple minutes to Member Inman, who was the board member on scene for this accident, and thank you for your work.
Thanks, Chair. First off, to the staff, thank you for dedicating almost a year of your life to this. I know for many of you it has been a singular mission. For many others, they've helped and supported, so we appreciate it. It is not easy what you do, nor what you face every day. To the family members, I'm sorry. On behalf of all of us, we should not be here. I told you yesterday, none of us should be here. You would hope someday we could actually get rid of the NTSB because there was no longer a need. But unfortunately, from tragedy, we draw knowledge to improve the safety for us all. So for that, I'm sorry. It will not be an easy day. I think as Mike just said, there is no singular person to blame for this. These were systemic issues across multiple organizations. And I think as you'll see, we will place a lot of the information that you're going to hear on those responsible organizations and hopefully make recommendations so that this never happens again. But while the board meeting may end today, it's not over. Tomorrow begins the advocacy. It begins the time to get the recommendations. It's the time to actually really start the hard work for a lot of people that may go on for years, but we will be with you throughout that time. We're not going anywhere. I know you're not. We're there to work with you and to help you in any way we can. So for that, again, I am sorry for us being here. I wish it did not happen. I never want to sit before another family and do the briefings like we had to do in the days after that crash. I know we cried together, and we'll probably do that again today. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Inman. Appreciate that. The NTSB meets today to finalize our investigation of the mid-air collision between a Black Hawk operated by the U.S. Army under the call sign PAT-25 and a CRJ-700 operated by PSA Airlines as American Airlines Flight 5342. The collision occurred on January 29, 2025, at about 8:48 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, about half a mile southeast of Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport. Tragically, there were no survivors. The 2 pilots, 2 flight attendants, and 60 passengers aboard the airplane, and 3 crew members aboard the helicopter were fatally injured. I want to take a moment to address the 67 people, the families and friends of the 67 people who died that day. I imagine every day since January 29th has been incredibly difficult. And I imagine that today is even more difficult. And Thursday, as we mark 1 year since this tragedy occurred, since you lost your loved ones. As a mom, I can only imagine all that you've been through. You are in our daily prayers. I pray for you every single day. And on behalf of everyone at the NTSB, our entire agency, please accept our heartfelt condolences and our deepest, deepest sympathies. Unknowingly, you are also an inspiration to so many of us. You have, in the wake of absolute devastation, shown remarkable selflessness, courageously advocating for important reforms in aviation safety to save lives for others. I have no doubt that the information uncovered by our investigation will support all of your efforts to make aviation safer, to work towards a future where no family endures such tremendous loss. Our family assistance team and the American Red Cross are here today to provide support for anyone here who might need it. Colleagues, where could you indicate where you are in the room right now? We have several. If you can stand, raise your hand. Some in the back. If anyone needs support, please do not hesitate to ask. We have private rooms that we can sit down with you and meet with you. I also want to recognize NTSB's staff for your incredible work on this investigation, which is undoubtedly one of the most complex in NTSB's history. If anyone would like a glimpse of what these dedicated safety experts have done over the past year, look no further than the public docket for this investigation. It spans more than 19,000 pages and includes testimony from our 3-day, 33-hour investigative hearing last July. And yet, we can never quantify the time you dedicated to this investigation over the past year, from your work on scene to the countless hours spent analyzing and distilling the information into a comprehensive report that exceeds 500 pages to ensure every lesson is learned from this devastating tragedy. That you did so in less than 12 months' time while meeting the high bar for quality and impartiality that our agency is known for. At one point, working through the longest government shutdown in history with a myriad of other accident investigations underway is a true testament to your dedication and your professionalism, and we thank you for all that you do. There is a tendency in the immediate aftermath of any investigation or any accident that we investigate to question human error, the actions or inactions of individuals. However, human error in complex systems, like our modern aviation system and the national airspace system, isn't a cause, it's a consequence. Many things need to go wrong for an accident to occur. In any investigation, the NTSB could choose to focus on a simple moment, on what happened immediately prior to an accident, on the individuals involved. But that's not the whole picture. To quote research from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, what we refer to as human error is in reality the last event in the causal chain immediately preceding a crash or accident. Indeed, in board meetings over the years, in our findings and our analyses across all modes of transportation, we've often referred to the work of leading scholars like Dr. James Reason, Captain Dan Marino, and Professor Nancy Levison to demonstrate that human error is a symptom of deeper underlying systemic failures, as my colleagues stated in their opening statements. A consequence, not a cause. These underlying deficiencies, often referred to as latent conditions or systemic vulnerabilities, are what aligned to allow for the worst U.S. aviation disaster in terms of fatalities since November 12, 2001, when American Airlines Flight 587 crashed into a residential area of Belle Harbor, New York, killing all 260 people aboard the airplane and 5 on the ground. And certainly we remember always the 50 people who lost their lives on February 12, 2009, when Colgan Air Flight 3407 crashed into a residence in Clarence Center, New York. A year before the mid-air collision at DCA, Alaska Airlines Flight 1282 experienced an in-flight separation of the left mid-exit door plug and rapid depressurization during climb after takeoff from Portland International Airport. We were fortunate no one lost their life or was seriously injured. But within weeks, there was a lot of focus on human error, on the actions of a team of Boeing manufacturing personnel in Renton. In the final investigation report, we cited Dr. James Reason. Within a robust system, the introduction of a single error is almost never the only cause of an accident. Rather, several barriers of defense must fail for the error to lead to an accident. In other words, there was a long chain of events that led to the door plug departing the aircraft, just as there is for every accident we investigate. In preparing for this board meeting, I reviewed a myriad, almost all, mid-air collisions we've investigated since 1968. When a North Central Airlines Flight 261, a Convair 580, collided with a Cessna 150 near General Mitchell Airport in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. That was one of 38 mid-air collisions we investigated in 1968. A year later, we investigated the mid-air collision of Allegheny Airlines Flight 853 and a small Piper Cherokee outside Shelbyville, Indiana, killing 83 people. Within months, the board held a hearing on mid-air collisions in general and issued 14 recommendations aimed at preventing them from reoccurring, including our first recommendation to expeditiously develop and implement a collision avoidance system in all civil aircraft. Fast forward 50 years to 2019. I was the board member on scene for a mid-air collision between a de Havilland DHC-2 Beaver airplane and a de Havilland DHC-3 Otter airplane, about 8 miles northeast of Ketchikan, Alaska. 6 people died, 10 were seriously injured. Mr. Banning and Dr. Bramble were also on scene. We didn't conclude that the cause was pilot error, that one pilot hit the other's plane. Rather, we concluded that the inherent limitations of the see and avoid concept were the concern. The similarities between the mid-air collisions we investigated 50 years ago in 1969, in Ketchikan in 2019, and in DCA, near DCA in 2025 are chilling. In any one of them, we could have blamed flight crews, individual pilots, maintenance personnel, or controllers, but we didn't, because we have long recognized that human error is a symptom of a system that needs to be redesigned. That is a quote from Professor Nancy Levison. When Spaceship Two broke up during a test flight in 2014, our probable cause didn't cite human error, but scaled composites' failure to consider and protect against the possibility that a single human error could result in a catastrophic hazard. And in 2022, when an Amtrak train derailed after hitting a dump truck that was blocking a grade crossing in Mendon, Missouri, we didn't blame the driver. We found the design of the crossing was significantly flawed. It reduced drivers' ability to see approaching trains and made stopping difficult for heavy trucks. That enabled Governor Parsons to address not only the safety of that grade crossing, but make improvements to 49 others across Missouri, saving countless lives. Steve Wallace, the former director of the FAA Office of Accident Investigations, was interviewed in 2023 to mark the 20th anniversary of the Space Shuttle Columbia disaster. After the Columbia disintegrated upon re-entry to Earth, killing all 7 astronauts on board, the NTSB was heavily involved in the investigation. In fact, one of our leading aerospace engineers who actually did the structural work for this investigation did the work on Columbia with NASA. Steve was a member of the Columbia Accident Investigation Board. In the interview, he cites the lesson he learned from our investigators. Quote, NTS people have a saying that when you find the human error, that's not the end of the investigation, that's the beginning of the investigation. What is the true root cause? The root cause is the thing that you have to change so it doesn't happen again. Commercial aviation embraced the same shift in root cause analysis, and the results were powerful. In fact, they challenged the NTSB to do better when we only focused on human error back in the 1970s and before that. And as a result, flying became safer. Before this tragedy occurred on January 29th, 2025, the U.S. aviation system was experiencing a record level of safety. That is the power of taking a systems approach, which is based not on speculation, but on decades of research, evidence, and our own investigations where the lessons learned turn into lives saved. As aviation safety evolves, so do the systems and so do the risks. I'll repeat, within a robust system, the introduction of a single error is almost never the only cause of an accident. Rather, several barriers of defense must fail for the error to lead to an accident. We are here today to discuss those failures. Today, you will hear how deep underlying systemic failures, system flaws aligned to create the conditions that led to this devastating tragedy. From design of our airspace around DCA to the limitations of see and avoid, which we've been warning about for over 5 decades, to failures of entire organizations to evaluate and act on readily available data, heed repeated recommendations, and foster robust safety cultures, to name a few. Months ago, I received a letter from someone sitting in this audience today whose fiance was aboard 5342. In that letter, he challenged us to, quote, leave no stone unturned, ask the hard, uncomfortable questions that will ruffle feathers, and let no one obfuscate or delay the truth. I assure you, we did just that. You will see today that we left no stone unturned. We asked the hard, uncomfortable questions that ruffled feathers, and we got to the truth. Our work, however, doesn't end today, as Member Inman stated, with the issuance of a final report. This is just the first step. We must, it is our duty to relentlessly, vigorously pursue safety change, which means we must do everything in our power, even ruffle feathers, to get our recommendations implemented, or this will happen again. I'd like to thank the first responders on behalf of the board. I have a slide listing all of the first responders that were on scene, the 8 organizations, tremendous work. As you can see, dozens of organizations responded to the scene of this tragedy to support search and recovery efforts and assist in our investigative work. Law enforcement, fire officials, dive teams, federal, state, and local agencies we don't often talk about, but they're human too. And what they experience can also be quite difficult. So thank you, if you're listening or you're here, thank you for your public service, for your dedication, and for your heart. You embody the best. You embody the best, each of you, of what public service means. Now let's turn to today's meeting. We're going to do things a little bit differently today, as there's a lot of complex information that we have to go through. We've divided staff presentations into 3 sections, each of which will be followed immediately by board member questions. We believe this is the best way for those watching and in the room to follow along. So let me go through today's agenda. Media will want to get their little pens out. You'll know, look, they are all actually doing it right now. Okay. So in a moment, Brian Curtis, our Deputy Managing Director for Investigations, will introduce the staff. Then we have 75 minutes of staff presentations, starting with our investigator in charge. Then we will move to air traffic control. We will discuss air traffic control and human performance, and then we will go through air traffic control post-accident drug and alcohol testing. We will then have 45 minutes or so of board member questions, and then we will take a break, a 15-minute break, which should occur somewhere around 11:30. We will then move into a second group of staff presentations. That will take about 45 minutes. We'll start with collision avoidance and ADSB, move into helicopter operational factors, and then move into human performance. Then there will be 45 minutes or so of board member questions just on that section and relevant material in our docket and the draft board report. Then we will break for lunch. I imagine, assuming everything goes right, and I mean that we don't lose heat or video, that I've probably doomed us now, we'll go for a lunch break. That should occur shortly after 1 o'clock. We'll have an hour for lunch. I want to make sure that our staff, most importantly, has the break they need to eat, to get water or Gatorade, and to regroup before the next portion of the board meeting. So after lunch, we'll come back around a little bit after 2 o'clock. Then we'll go through staff presentations focused on safety management systems, safety culture, and safety data. After that, we'll have board member questions focused just on that portion, on that presentation and relevant material in the docket and the board report. Then we'll go to a 15-minute break. That should be slightly after 3 o'clock. And then we'll go through the proposed findings, the proposed probable cause, and the proposed recommendations, as well as the draft report. Mr. Curtis will be supplied with a lot of water because he will be doing a lot of reading, from what I understand. His reading alone on the findings, probable cause, and recommendations in total will take about an hour and 10 minutes. That's not even considering the time that we'll have for deliberation. We have numerous findings and numerous recommendations. And after that, I'll have a brief closing statement, and then we'll adjourn. Okay, so I'll now turn it over to Mr. Curtis, our Deputy Managing Director for Investigations, to introduce the NTSB team.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair, and good morning to the board. I'll now introduce staff for today's meeting. Unless otherwise noted, staff are from the Office of Aviation Safety. In the front row to my right, Tim LeBaron, Director for the Office of Aviation Safety. Bryce Banning, Investigator in charge for this investigation. Brian Soper, Air Traffic Control. Dr. Catherine Wilson, Air Traffic Control and Human Performance. Dr. Taran Kayagil, Medical from the Office of Research and Engineering. Behind me in the second row, left to right, Jennifer Adler, Director for the Office of Safety Recommendations and Communications. Tom McMurray, General Counsel for the NTSB. Carl Schultheist, Vehicle Performance Chief from the Office of Research and Engineering. Allison Diaz, Report Writer. Sarah Lewis, Air Traffic Control. And Marie Moeller, Aircraft Performance from the Office of Research and Engineering. And in the third row, left to right, Olivia Fowler, Audiovisual for today's meeting. Chihoon Shin, Helicopter Operations. Mike Richards, Meteorology. John O'Callahan, Aircraft Performance from the Office of Research and Engineering. And Nathaniel Hoyt, Recommendations from the Office of Safety Recommendations and Communications. Additional staff present to answer questions from the board today: Captain Van McKinney, Helicopter Operations. Dr. Jenna Price, Safety Data from the Office of Research and Engineering. Dr. Bill Bramble, Human Performance. Michael Portman, Recorders from the Office of Research and Engineering. Caleb Wagner, Systems. Captain Rocky Stone, Airplane Operations. And Dr. Lauren Groff, Safety Data from the Office of the Managing Director. The presentations will begin now with an investigation overview by the investigator in charge, Bryce Banning. Mr. Banning.
Good morning, Chairwoman Hamady, Member Graham, and Member Inman. My presentation will begin with an animation covering history of flight, helicopter routes, and an overview of the air traffic control communications shortly before the accident. Then I will discuss the visibility study and play a second animation which will depict simulated views from the cockpits of each of the accident aircraft. I will also cover the wreckage examination, exclusionary findings, safety issues, and previously issued safety recommendations. Air traffic control audio is included in these animations. Cockpit voice recorder audio from both airplane and helicopter are not included in these animations, but their transcript will be shown. We realize that some attendees and remote viewers may find these animations difficult to view and hear. We will pause before starting the animations to allow those currently in the boardroom to leave for the duration of the animation or turn away from your screens if viewing remotely. We will inform you when the animations are finished playing. We will begin the first animation now and will pause for those who would like to leave the room or turn away from their screens. The animation will play for approximately 12 minutes. We will be dimming the lights in the boardroom so that people can see the animation better. On January 29th, 2025, about 8:48 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, a Sikorsky UH-60 Lima helicopter operated by the United States Army and a PSA Airlines CRJ-700 collided in flight approximately 1/2 mile southeast of Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport, or DCA. The two pilots, 2 flight attendants, and 60 passengers on board the airplane, and all 3 crew members on board the helicopter were fatally injured. The military helicopter flight originated from Davison Army Airfield, Fort Belvoir, Virginia. The flight was an annual evaluation for the pilot with the use of night vision goggles. The airplane was operated by PSA Airlines, doing business as American Airlines Flight 5342, a scheduled domestic passenger flight under Title 14 of the Code of Federal Regulations, Part 121, from Wichita, Kansas to Washington, D.C. Night visual meteorological conditions prevailed at the time of the accident. In the radio communications, the accident airplane was using call sign Blue Streak 5342, and the Army helicopter was using call sign Pat 25. The Federal Aviation Administration provides charts that specify helicopter routes to facilitate operations in high-traffic areas. The helicopter routes have no defined lateral boundaries, but they do have maximum altitude limits. The helicopter routes are depicted by a blue line on the Google Earth image. Helicopter Route 1's western section begins in Cabin John, Maryland, and follows the Potomac River southeast to Washington, D.C., through the Tidal Basin and the Washington Channel to Haines Point, and then turns east along the Anacostia River. At the time of the accident, helicopter Route 4 intercepted Route 1 at Haines Point and continued south along the Potomac River's eastern shore past DCA and the Wilson Bridge. North of Chain Bridge, the maximum altitude is 1,300 feet. Between Chain Bridge and Key Bridge, the maximum altitude is 700 feet. Between Key Bridge and Memorial Bridge, the maximum altitude is 300 feet, and south of Memorial Bridge to the Wilson Bridge, the maximum altitude is 200 feet. At 8:33 p.m., 15 minutes before the collision, Pat 25 requested permission to travel from Cabin John along Helicopter Route 1 to Helicopter Route 4 to Davison Army Airfield. The DCA local controller approved the request.
Pat 25 is looking for Cabin John, Route 1, Route 4 to Davison. Pat 25 approved.
There was no communication between Pat 25 and the DCA local controller for 12 minutes. At 8:39 p.m., 9 minutes before the collision, Flight 5342 was cleared for the Mount Vernon Visual Runway 1 approach to DCA by Potomac Terminal Radar Approach Control. Select in-cockpit communications between the instructor and the pilot in Pat 25, primarily about altitude, will be shown on a black background in the animation. At 8:43 p.m., 5 minutes before the collision, Flight 5342 was handed off to the DCA Tower Local Controller. The local controller asked the crew of Flight 5342 if they could switch their approach from runway 1 to runway 33.
Bushing 5342, Washington Tower 1 star 320 plus 25. Can you take runway 33?
The crew accepted the change and they were cleared to land on runway 33. This magnified satellite photograph shows the locations of runway 1 and runway 33 at DCA.
Yeah, we can do 33 for Blue Sheep 342.
Blue Sheep 342 at the Wilson Bridge, change to start runway 33, runway 33, clear to land.
Change to runway 33, runway 33 for Blue Sheep 342.
There was no further communication between the local controller and the crew of Flight 5342 before the collision. This animation shows aircraft in the vicinity of DCA for the 3 minutes before the collision. The local control and helicopter control positions were combined, and the local controller was communicating with 6 airplanes and 5 helicopters. Communications took place on an airplane radio frequency and a helicopter radio frequency. The local controller was broadcasting on both the airplane and helicopter radio frequencies, but airplane communications were only heard in other airplanes, and helicopter communications were only heard in other helicopters. The animation includes air traffic control audio for both the airplane and helicopter frequencies. A transcript of the controller communications will appear in the upper left, and the local controller will be indicated on the map. A transcript of aircraft communications will appear in the lower left, and the aircraft call sign will be highlighted on the map. The controller was also communicating with aircraft outside the bounds of this map, which will be indicated. The accident helicopter is shown in orange with the label PAT 25, and the accident airplane is shown in magenta with the label PSA 5342.
Jet 789, 1 star 320 to 15, gust 25, traffic 2 out, no delay, runway 1, clear takeoff.
Clear takeoff, runway 1, no delay, Jet 789.
Flight Deck 1, landing assured, Wood 1.
Flight Jet 1, Roger for exchange for good night.
Pad 25 Memorial.
Pad 25, Roger.
Washington, American 3130 with you, runway 1.
American 3130, Washington Tower, 1 star 310 to 14, gust 25, runway 1, clear to land. Traffic will depart, may depart approach arrival.
Okay, clear to land, runway 1, American 3130.
Jet 789, contact on Barge, good day.
Okay.
American 3130, slow the funnel.
Slow on American 3130.
Pad 25, traffic just south of Wilson Bridge to CRJ at 1,200 feet, start from runway 33. This is pressure roof. American 1630 Tower, runway 1, lawfully, traffic throughout, start from runway 33, this traffic on 6 mile funnel.
Line up and wait, runway 1, American 1630. Runway 1.
17, stand by. Issue 5307, keep rolling out to November, ground 47, good day.
November 307. National College, good evening, Air Care 1 with you, single medevac.
American 1630 1 star 320 to 14, gust 25, traffic 2 mile left base from runway 33, no delay, runway 1 clear for immediate takeoff.
Number 1, clear for takeoff, American 1630.
Muscle 70 request. Most of you say route 3 to zone 6. Muscle 7 approved.
American 472, National College, good evening, Air Care 1 with you, single medevac helicopter 1,000 feet, 29901 on the altimeter, requesting zone 6 for Fairfax.
Medevac Air Carrier 1 Washington Star, National Altimeter 2990. Approved to Washington Class Bravo Airspace for Land Shared at Fairfax.
2990 for Air Carrier 1, copy.
Pad 25, get the CRJ in flight. Pad 25, pass behind the CRJ.
This club has a aircraft in flight, precision separation.
This separation.
American 4782, my path number and visual.
American 472, Washington Star 1 Star 32017.
The following video shows the airplane The animation is done playing. A visibility study documents the location, size, and movement of other aircraft in each respective pilot's field of view and how the aircraft structure might limit that field of view. Human performance investigators can determine how conspicuous each aircraft would be to the flight crew and how that impacts their see and avoid task. The visibility study faced additional challenges due to the night conditions and use of night vision goggles by the helicopter crew. As we will discuss, it is difficult to accurately represent how the night lighting or cultural lighting looked to the crews at the time of the accident. Investigators documented the cultural lighting around DCA in a series of night observation flights conducted on March 27th and 28th of 2025. We chose these observation dates to replicate the conditions on the night of the accident. Crews flew the accident flight paths individually using exemplar aircraft, which were observed by human performance, operations, and air traffic control investigators. We recorded the view in both videos and photos from each aircraft, the air traffic control tower, and on the ground. This documentation was used to determine which available flight simulator program best represented the cultural lighting at the time of the accident and informed the human performance analysis. Shown is a video frame recorded from the cockpit of the CRJ night observation flight when turning onto final for runway 33. This captures a view of the cultural lighting in the DC area. However, no device records exactly how the human eye sees a scene. These types of images from various recording devices and the impressions of the human performance, operations, and air traffic control investigators from the night observation flights were used together to inform the analysis of the difficulty of the see and avoid task. The visibility study recreates the view from the cockpit and includes what the airplane structure would obscure. The photo on the left is of a CRJ 700 cockpit and labels the 4 cockpit windows: left window, left windshield, right windshield, and right window, and indicates the location of the captain, who was the pilot flying, and the first officer, who was the pilot monitoring. The image on the right shows the field of view of the captain looking forward through the left windshield. The light gray mask indicates how the structure of the airplane would have obscured some of the view. The night imagery is from Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024 and the simulated view shown is from 35 seconds before the collision. The location of PAT 25 is circled, but it is difficult to detect and identify against the cultural lighting of Washington, D.C. The left photo shows the helicopter cockpit and labels the left window, left windshield, center windshield, right windshield, and right window, and indicates the location of the pilot, who was the pilot flying, and the instructor pilot, who was the pilot monitoring. The image on the right shows a view of the instructor pilot in the right seat looking forward. In addition to the aircraft structure, the image on the right includes a mask of the night vision goggle view looking straight ahead. While the NVGs are binocular, the brain merges the image into a single circular view. In this image, the NVG view is shown as white phosphor, but the animation will show a green phosphor display. Both types of NVGs were available to the crew. This image is from 19 seconds before the collision, and the location of the CRJ is circled. While the location, size, and movement of each aircraft in a pilot's field of view is accurate, there are important limitations to the visibility study, including, first, the accuracy of the cultural lighting. You will see in the animation that some landmarks are unrealistically bright. Additionally, not all of the aircraft south of the Wilson Bridge were visible in the simulation. Secondly, the accuracy of the external lighting on each aircraft, which affects how visible it is against the cultural lighting. The CRJ 700 model for Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024 did not have functional external lighting, so a model of a Boeing 737 was used instead. The differences in the appearance of these airplanes at night is insignificant until just before the collision. Lastly, the accuracy of the night vision goggle view. The goggles are shown stationary, and the pilot's head does not move or scan. The imagery also does not include additional light sources that night vision goggles would show more brightly, such as stars. We will begin the second animation now, and will pause for those who would like to leave the room or turn away from their screens. The animation will play for approximately 8 minutes. We will be dimming the lights in the boardroom so that people can see the animation better. This animation presents the simulated view from the right seat of the helicopter. A dark gray structural mask generated from a three-dimensional laser scan of an exemplar aircraft is overlaid on the scene. A light gray mask depicts the mounting structure of the night vision goggles positioned for the instructor pilot looking straight ahead. The green tint mimics a green phosphor visual effect, but the actual behavior of the night vision goggles has not been simulated. Crew communications transcribed from the cockpit voice recorder are shown as text at lower left. Audio recordings of air traffic control communications on the helicopter frequency are synchronized with the animation, with corresponding transcript text displayed in the center. Radio interference blocked some transmissions from the local controller and other helicopters. Transmissions that were blocked are indicated by striking through words in the transcript. A moving map depicting the locations of PAT 25 and Flight 5342 and synchronized with the view from the cockpit will be shown at lower right.
Jet 789, 1 star 320 to 15, Gust 25, traffic 2 out, no delay, runway 1, clear for takeoff.
Blackjack 1, landing is here in mode 1.
Blackjack 1, Roger for exchange crew, good night.
25 Memorial.
Pat 25, Roger. American 3130 Washington Tower, 1 star 310 to 14, Gust 25, runway 1, clear to land. Traffic will depart, may depart parts arrival. Jet 789, concept on Parch, good day. American 3130, slow the funnel. Pat 25, traffic just south of Wilson Bridge to CRJ at 1,200 feet, circle runway 33. This separation roof. American 1630 Tower, runway 1, lot boy, traffic throughout circle runway 33, this traffic on 6 mile funnel.
Tower Muscle 7, approaching Springfield, request route 3 to zone 6.
7, stand by. Issue 5307, keep rolling out to November, ground port 7, good day.
National Tower, good evening, Air Care 1 with you, single medevac.
American 1630 1 star 320 to 14, Gust 25, traffic 2 mile left base runway 33, no delay, runway 1 clear for immediate takeoff. Muscle 7, zero request.
And Muscle 7, request route 3 to zone 6.
Muscle 7, you say route 3 to zone 6?
Hey, sir,
Muscle 7 approved.
National Tower, good evening, Air Care 1 with you, single medevac helicopter 1,000 feet, 29901 on the altimeter, requesting zone 6 for Fairfax.
Medevac Air Care 1, Washington Tower, National Altimeter 29990. Approved through Washington class, Robert Space for Land Assured at Fairfax.
29990 for Air Care 1, copy.
Pat 25, do you have the CRJ in sight? Pat 25, pass behind the CRJ.
This club has a aircraft in sight for the separation.
This separation. American 472, Washington Tower, 1 star 320 to 17.
This animation presents a simulated view from the right seat of the CRJ. A dark gray structural mask generated from a three-dimensional laser scan of an exemplar aircraft is overlaid on the scene. Crew communications transcribed from the cockpit voice recorder are shown as text at lower left. Audio recordings of air traffic control communications on the airplane frequency are synchronized with the animation, with corresponding transcript text displayed at lower right. A moving map depicting the locations of both aircraft synchronized with the view from the cockpit is shown at upper left.
Jet 789, 1 star 320 to 15, Gust 25, traffic 2 out, no delay, runway 1, clear takeoff.
Clear takeoff, runway 1, no delay, Jet 789.
Jet 1, Roger for exchange crew, good night. Pat 25, Roger.
Washington Tower, American 3130 with you, runway 1.
American 3130, Washington Tower, 1 star 310 to 14, Gust 25, runway 1, clear to land. Traffic will depart, may depart parts arrival.
Okay, clear to land, runway 1, American 3130.
Yeah, 789, concept on Barge, good day.
Okay.
American 3130, slow the funnel.
Slow on American 3130.
Pad 25, traffic just south of Wilson Bridge to CRJ at 1,200 feet, circle runway 33. Pressure roof. American 1630 tower, runway 1, lot boy, traffic throughout circle runway 33, this traffic on 6 mile funnel.
Line up for wait, runway 1, American 1630. American 472 by CAT, runway 1.
17, stand by. Issue 5307, keep rolling out to November, ground 47, good day.
November 307.
American 1630, wind star 32014, gust 25, traffic 2 mile left base, runway 33, no delay, runway 1, clear for immediate takeoff.
Number 1, clear for takeoff, American 1630.
Muscle 70 request. Most of you say route through to zone 6. Muscle 7 approved.
American 4782, Mount Vernon visual 1.
Medevac Air Carrier 1, Washington Tower, National Altimeter 290, approved through Washington class, Robert Space, Portland, Insured at Fairfax. Pad 25, do you have the CRJ in sight? Pad 25, pass bond at CRJ.
American 4782 by Bass, Mount Vernon visual.
American 472, Washington Tower, wind star 32017.
The animation is done playing. The wreckage of both aircraft were located in the Potomac River in water depths ranging between 1 to 8 feet, depending on location and tidal conditions. About 90% of the structure of both aircraft were recovered. Examination of the recovered wreckage indicated that the helicopter's main rotor contacted the underside of the airplane's left wing, resulting in the outboard section of the wing separating in flight. Video evidence showed both aircraft rapidly descending and impacting the water after the collision. The NTSB's investigation's comprehensive review of the accident circumstances determined that the following did not contribute to the cause of the accident. The pilots of Flight 5342 were certificated and qualified in accordance with federal regulations. The pilots of Flight 5342 were medically qualified for duty, and available evidence does not indicate that they were impaired by effects of medical conditions or substances at the time of the accident. Review of the pilot's time since waking and sleep opportunities in the days before the accident indicated that the pilots had adequate rest opportunities. The pilot, instructor pilot, and crew chief on board PAT 25 were qualified and current in their positions as designated by the unit commander in accordance with Army regulations. The pilot, instructor pilot, and crew chief were medically qualified for duty, and available evidence does not indicate that they were impaired by effects of medical conditions or substances at the time of the accident. Review of the 3 crew members' time since waking and sleep opportunities in the days before the accident indicated that the crew had adequate rest opportunities. Both aircraft were properly certificated, equipped, and maintained. The operations supervisor and 4 controllers who were working in the DCA Air Traffic Control Tower cab at the time of the accident were certificated and current in accordance with federal regulations. The local controller, assistant local controller, and operations supervisor were medically qualified for duty, and available evidence does not indicate that they were impaired by effects of medical conditions at the time of the accident. Review of the local controller, assistant local controller, and operations supervisor's time since waking and sleep opportunities in the days before the accident indicated that the controllers had adequate rest opportunities. A review of observations recorded throughout the night of the accident revealed no evidence of any local atmospheric pressure anomalies that would have impacted barometric altimeter readings. The investigation explored multiple safety issues. The design of the Washington, D.C. area helicopter routes and operators' understanding of the route structure and limitations. Air traffic controller workload, position combining, and communications practices. The extensive use of pilot-applied visual separation and the inherent limitations of see and avoid. Deficiencies in FAA safety culture and post-accident drug and alcohol testing. The limitations of the traffic awareness and alerting systems on both aircraft. And shortcomings in FAA and U.S. Army safety assurance and risk management processes, including lack of proactive data sharing and analysis to identify and mitigate mid-air collision risk. Early in the investigation, the NTSB found insufficient separation between helicopter traffic on Route 4 and aircraft landing on runway 33, and recognized an alternate route for helicopters was needed to prevent a mid-air collision. As a result, the NTSB issued 2 urgent safety recommendations on March 11th, 2025. The first recommendation asked to prohibit operations on helicopter Route 4 between Haynes Point and the Wilson Bridge when runways 15 and 33 were being used at DCA. The second recommendation asked to designate an alternative helicopter route that could be used to facilitate travel between Haynes Point and the Wilson Bridge when that segment of Route 4 was closed. Immediately following the accident, the FAA implemented temporary airspace restrictions around DCA. On March 14, 2025, the FAA removed from helicopter route charts the section of helicopter Route 4 between Haynes Point and the Wilson Bridge. Additionally, the FAA prohibited use of DCA runways 1533 and 422 during specific limited helicopter operations in the vicinity of DCA. What we found about helicopter route design was that airplane pilots were unaware of the possible conflict between helicopter routes and approach and departure corridors at DCA. Pilots were not aware of these conflicts because the current aeronautical charts do not provide adequate information. This is not unique to DCA. Lastly, the FAA was unable to provide documentation of the required annual reviews for the Baltimore-Washington helicopter route chart. As a result, Staff has proposed 5 recommendations to the FAA in this area. The following 3 slides list the names of the NTSB staff that supported the accident investigation. NTSB invited qualified parties to participate in our investigation. The next 2 slides list out the parties. In accordance with the provisions of Annex 13 to the Convention on Civil Aviation, the Transportation Safety Board of Canada, representing the state of design and manufacture of the airplane, provided an accredited representative. Technical advisors from Transport Canada and MHI RJ Aviation participated in the investigation. Staff will be giving presentations on the following topics: air traffic control, human performance as it relates to air traffic control, and the FAA's post-accident drug and alcohol testing of air traffic controllers. A discussion will follow these presentations. Then presentations will be provided for automatic dependent surveillance broadcast, or ADSB, and collision avoidance systems, helicopter operations, and human performance as it relates to both aircraft. A discussion will follow these presentations. Lastly, we will have a presentation on safety data and safety management systems, followed by discussion rounds. Chairwoman Homendy, this concludes my presentation. Mr. Soper will now discuss air traffic control.
Good morning. My presentation will discuss the airspace surrounding DCA, helicopter Route 4, formation and activities of the DCA ATC Tower Helicopter Working Group, the DCA Tower Facility Level Classification, traffic management challenges at DCA, combining of the local and helicopter control positions, use of visual separation, traffic advisories, ATC safety alerts, and positive control. The airspace surrounding DCA is uniquely complex, being a Class B airspace that includes the Washington, D.C. Special Flight Rules Area, or SFRA, the Flight Restricted Zone, or FREEZE, as well as prohibited areas. The tower's delegated airspace at DCA is also more expansive than that seen at similar airports, covering more than 520 square miles and containing extensive helicopter operating areas and routes charted on the Baltimore-Washington helicopter route chart. Helicopter Route 4 was established in 1986 in the first edition of the Baltimore-Washington helicopter route chart and had changed very little since that time. Helicopter Route 4 was one of several charted routes designed for the transition of helicopters through the DCA Class B airspace. The Route 4 design had always posed a proximal conflict to the runway 33 approach corridor and runway 15 departure corridor, but it was continued to be used through the years. The routes were never procedurally separated, meaning there were no written procedures in place to ensure that when applied, aircraft would be automatically separated by a required minimum. While we learned from the FAA during the investigative hearing that these routes were never constructed to provide or ensure separation, we also learned that there was a lack of clear and consistent understanding and varied interpretations across user groups. The DCA ATC Tower Helicopter Working Group was formed as a direct result of a significant near-midair collision in 2013 between a helicopter and an airplane in the very same location of this accident. The working group was composed of ATC personnel from DCA Tower only, with local helicopter operators being invited as necessary to address identified safety concerns as they arose. The working group proposed several recommendations to the FAA, including one to remove or relocate Route 4 in order to deconflict with the runway 33 approach corridor and runway 15 departure corridor, as well as the addition of hotspots to aeronautical charting to bring awareness to pilots about the increased risk potential when operating in these areas of the proximity events. The FAA chose not to act on the working group's recommendation to remove or relocate Route 4. Additionally, the FAA rejected the working group's recommendation to add hotspots to helicopter route charts. In 2018, due to a change in the method in computing facility-level traffic counts, DCA Tower was downgraded from a Level 10 to a Level 9 facility. The FAA declined to provide detailed criteria or the metrics used to establish DCA's facility level, but information available suggested that total traffic count was the driving factor in determining facility levels in general. Staff feel that there was an inadequate consideration given to airspace, airport, and operations complexity in the downgrading of DCA's tower facility level, and negatively impacted facility health as they experienced an inability to retain or recruit the experience level needed in control staff. In addition, no consideration appeared to be given to the high cost of living in the DC area, with a 15% difference in pay between levels 9 and 10, the biggest salary gap between any two air traffic control facility levels. We found that DCA Tower had significant airfield, airspace, and mixed fleet operations complexities that were inconsistent with their current facility level. We also found that aside from the traffic count alone, FAA provided no evidence that operational complexities or cost of living were considered in their criteria for establishing air traffic control facility levels. Staff have proposed 2 recommendations to the FAA in this area. According to public records, as of 2023, and reportedly still accurate today, DCA had the busiest single runway in the national airspace system. Total operations exceeding those documented at airports including Chicago O'Hare, Los Angeles, Dallas-Fort Worth, and LaGuardia. DCA was a capacity-constrained airport, and their traffic flow was largely managed through airport arrival rates, miles in trail spacing, and slot controls. Making this management more difficult was the limited surface area and complex airfield geometry at DCA that required regular workarounds by ATC in order to avoid delays or gridlock. The FAA used slots to limit scheduled traffic at capacity-constrained airports like DCA, as well as John F. Kennedy International Airport and LaGuardia International Airport in New York. DCA was limited to a maximum of 67 slots per hour, 60 of those by regulation, and an additional 7 allowed by statute. According to post-accident interviews conducted with DCA ATC staff, certain air carriers would routinely front and backload their scheduling into the first half hour and last half hour of a 2-hour block, which resulted in periods of compacted demand. This resulted in DCA reaching total operations of 80 or more per hour at times. DCA slots are allocated in 60-minute blocks. After LaGuardia experienced similar problems, a rulemaking change was adopted that requires their slots to be allocated in 30-minute blocks, providing a more consistent traffic flow. Time-based flow management, or TBFM, was a system whose core function was to provide the ability to schedule aircraft within a stream of traffic to reach a defined constraint point at specified times, creating a time-ordered sequence of traffic. Though reportedly equipment had been installed and the capability was there for several years, the FAA had not activated the system for DCA. Additionally, American Airlines testified at the investigative hearing that TBFM was used at several of their other hub airports and that it smoothed out the volume of traffic while also providing more accurate miles and trail. We found that DCA Tower routinely received less than the required miles and trail spacing from the Potomac TRACON, requiring controllers to build spacing to accommodate departures using various methods. A common mitigation strategy was to periodically offload arrivals to runway 33 as they were doing on the night of the accident. This involved requesting crews that were on approach to land on runway 1 to change their landing runway and circle to land on runway 33 instead. We found that DCA would benefit from established rulemaking similar to that used by LaGuardia, requiring allocation of traffic in 30-minute blocks rather than 60-minute blocks. We also found that time-based flow management would provide DCA Tower with a consistent flow of traffic, more accurate spacing, and greater predictability. We recently learned that phase 1 of this went operational in October of 2025, with full implementation planned to be completed by March 2026. Staff have proposed 3 recommendations to the FAA in this area. Combining of the control positions is commonplace in air traffic control, and in facilities like DCA Tower, detailed policy guidance is required to reduce the risk by preventing the combining of positions under the wrong circumstances. The policy at DCA regarding staffing of the helicopter control position had changed several times over the years, becoming less restrictive each time. During prescribed hours, the policy went from helicopter control must be open in 2016 and only authorized to be combined with air traffic manager or support manager approval, to 2023 becoming helicopter control must normally be decombined, meaning staffed separately. Then in 2024, it became helicopter control should normally be decombined, and it authorized the positions to be combined at the supervisor or controller in charge level's discretion. The softening in this policy from helicopter control must be open to helicopter control should normally be decombined with no requirement of a corresponding log entry or rationale opened the policy up for varied interpretation. On the day of the accident, the helicopter position had been open or staffed separately for less than 1.5 hours the entire day, and had been combined with local control for more than 5 hours leading up to the time of the accident. There was no requirement to log the combining of helicopter and control positions, nor any position combination at DCA Tower. Staff have proposed 1 recommendation to the FAA in this area. We will now show an animation and will pause for those who would like to leave the room or turn away from their screens. The animation will play for approximately 3 minutes. We will be dimming the lights in the boardroom so that people can see the animation better. This photograph from the interior of the DCA Air Traffic Control Tower shows the view to the southeast across the Potomac River. Traffic displays can be seen overhead. The traffic displays can be moved to suit the needs of the staff in the tower. This animation presents a simulated view from the tower. The point of view was based on the local controller's recollection of his position. The local controller could have changed position or orientation slightly on the night of the accident. The underlying animation was produced by the Federal Aviation Administration Target Generation Facility Simulation Branch. A dark gray structural mask generated from a three-dimensional laser scan of the tower conducted by NTSB staff is overlaid on the scene. Audio recordings of air traffic control communications are synchronized with the animation. Local controller broadcasts are shown in text at lower left. Aircraft broadcasts are shown in text at lower right.
National College, good evening, Air Care 1 with you, single medevac.
American 16, third to wind star 32014, gust 25, traffic 2 mile left base, runway 33, no delay, runway 1 clear for immediate takeoff.
Number 1, clear for takeoff, American 1630.
Muscle 7, zero request. Most of you say route for zone 6. Most 7 approved.
American 472, National College, good evening, Air Care 1 with you, single medevac helicopter 1,000 feet, 29901 on the altimeter, requesting zone 6 for Fairfax.
Medevac Air Care 1, Washington Tower, National Altimeter 29900. Approved through Washington class, Robert Space for Land Assured Fairfax.
29990 for Air Care 1, copy.
Pad 25, do you have the CRJ in sight? Pad 25, pass behind the CRJ.
This club has a aircraft in sight for the separation.
Be separate.
American 472, my path number and visual.
American 472, Washington Tower, 1 star 2017.
The animation has completed playing. There are two types of visual separation: tower applied, where the tower controller sees the involved aircraft and issues positive control instructions to effect separation; and pilot applied, where the pilot of one aircraft sees and maintains visual contact with the other aircraft and provides their own separation by maneuvering as necessary to avoid it. Visual separation was heavily relied upon and was the primary means of separating helicopter and fixed-wing traffic in the DCA area when weather conditions permitted. To not increase controller workload, traffic congestion, and traffic complexity, controllers were motivated to and routinely authorized visual separation for helicopters transiting the DCA airspace, and helicopter crews were encouraged to request visual separation as early as possible. According to facility records, DCA Tower had a documented history of controllers lacking in the understanding of basic fundamentals in pilot-applied visual separation, as well as a history of the misapplication of pilot-applied visual separation. The local controller's initial traffic advisory provided to PAT 25, reference PSA Flight 5342, was technically compliant, but no follow-on or updated traffic advisories were provided. There was no corresponding traffic advisory provided to PSA Flight 5342 at any time. The conflict alert first activated between PAT 25 and Flight 5342 26 seconds before the collision, while they were still about 1.6 miles apart and on converging courses. Considering the proximity of both aircraft and their continually converging courses, according to the radar replay of the event, targets were such that merging target procedures should have been provided, which would have included traffic advisories to both aircraft. The local controller stated they were concerned about both the close proximity of PAT 25 to PSA Flight 5342 and their converging courses. This, coupled with the conflict alert that was active at the time, the controller should have issued a safety alert, which would have included updated traffic advisory information and an alternate course of action if feasible. Neither were done in this case. Had a safety alert been issued, it would have increased the situation awareness of both crews and alerted them of their closing proximity to one another. Additionally, a timely safety alert may have allowed action to be taken by one or both crews to avert the collision. Positive control is defined by the FAA as the separation of all air traffic within designated airspace by air traffic control. And other FAA guidance included elements of positive control as taking command of control situations and not acting in a hesitant or unsure manner, and that a controller exercising positive control observes present and considers forecasted traffic to predict task overload and takes appropriate action to prevent or lessen the situation. Positive control was not exercised at all times on the night of the accident. Had the local controller exercised appropriate positive control with timely safety alert on the evening of the accident, one or both flight crews may have been able to take action in time to avert the collision. Thank you. Dr. Wilson will now continue with her presentation.
Good morning. I will discuss DCA air traffic control tower use of visual separation on the night of the accident, the concept of situation awareness, combining the local control and helicopter control positions, recognition of impending collision and expectation-driven process, the conflict alert system, radio communications when the local control and helicopter control positions are combined, time on position limitations, threat and error management, and risk management. Given the proximity of helicopter routes and zones to the approach and departure corridors for fixed-wing traffic, applying pilot-applied visual separation reduced controller workload and airspace congestion and complexity. As such, DCA ATC tower controllers were motivated to provide a traffic advisory and authorize visual separation for helicopters transiting DC airspace as early as possible. The local controller's expectation that PAT 25 crew had Flight 5342 in sight was not necessarily valid. As a result, there was potential for the local controller to overestimate the level of traffic awareness the PAT 25 crew had and to underestimate the level of information and assistance they might subsequently require to ensure collision avoidance. Situation awareness forms a basis for decision-making. Situation awareness is not only what the controller is perceiving in the current air traffic situation, but how they interpret that information and use it to project the future state of traffic moving in their airspace. Controllers must maintain awareness of each aircraft they are managing to include, for example, location, altitude, and airspeed, and anticipate where the aircraft will be in the seconds and minutes to follow. A controller's ability to maintain situation awareness is impacted by task and environmental factors, such as their workload and divided attention, and individual factors such as training and experience. As cognitive capacity is reduced, for example, with increasing workload due to increasing traffic complexity, traffic volume, and/or frequent radio communications, a controller's ability to maintain situation awareness is reduced. Because the local control and helicopter control positions were combined, the local controller was responsible for coordinating arrivals and departures, as well as VFR helicopter traffic transiting DCA airspace. In a post-accident interview, the local controller stated that he felt a little overwhelmed about 10 to 15 minutes before the accident when the traffic volume increased to 10 aircraft, consisting of 5 airplanes and 5 helicopters. But he felt the volume was manageable when 1 or 2 helicopters left the airspace. About 90 seconds before the collision, the traffic volume increased to a maximum of 12 aircraft, consisting of 7 airplanes and 5 helicopters. Radio communication showed that the local controller was shifting his focus between airborne, ground, and transiting aircraft. Keeping the local control and helicopter control positions combined on the night of the accident increased the local controller's workload and reduced his situation awareness. Controllers routinely monitor the current state of an aircraft and predict its future location in relation to other aircraft. Conflicts that develop slowly, particularly at night, are inherently difficult for people to recognize due to reduced visual cues. Gradual change can reduce situation awareness and delay recognition. The local controller expected that PAT 25 would remain clear of Flight 5342 because the PAT 25 instructor pilot stated that he had the airplane in sight and would maintain visual separation. The frequent use of pilot-applied visual separation reinforces the expectation that the pilot of one aircraft will maintain separation from another aircraft. Because it has repeatedly worked as expected, it can be more difficult for a controller to notice deviations, especially when workload is high, like on the night of the accident. The conflict alert system acts as a safety net designed to draw a controller's attention to a potential conflict using an oral alert, a flashing red CA on the certified tower radar display, or CTRD, and a conflict list on the CTRD indicating in red the aircraft involved. The image on the right depicts the red conflict alert that appeared for the accident aircraft. Conflict alerts are presented the same regardless of the severity of the conflict. Conflict alert activation is common at DCA ATC Tower. NTSB staff are concerned that frequent nuisance alerts may desensitize controllers to the alerts and lead to slower reaction time. Providing controllers with additional salient cues regarding the severity of a potential conflict would reduce controller cognitive load and likely improve response time. Staff have proposed 2 recommendations to the FAA in this area. The DCA ATC Tower utilized a discrete frequency for communicating with helicopters to avoid interference and frequency congestion, even when the local control and helicopter control positions were combined. Separate frequencies also made the process of decombining the helicopter and local control positions easier. When the local control and helicopter control positions were combined, airplane and helicopter pilots could hear all transmissions made by the controller. However, transmissions made by helicopters were not audible to airplanes, and transmissions made from airplanes were not audible to helicopters. This alleviated frequency congestion. However, pilots reported that hearing all transmissions would improve their situation awareness. Staff have proposed 1 recommendation to the FAA in this area. The operations supervisor had been working on a control position for over 4 hours at the time of the accident and had been working on the operations supervisor position specifically for the 2 hours before the accident. Given his extended time on position, it is likely that the operations supervisor was experiencing reduced alertness at the time of the accident, which decreased his ability to effectively assess operational risks. The collective bargaining agreement between the National Air Traffic Controllers Association, or NATCA, and the FAA require relief opportunities for all operational staff. However, the agreement does not cover supervisory personnel, and there are no mandatory relief periods for supervisors. Staff have proposed 1 recommendation to the FAA in this area. Threat and error management originated in the human factors literature and was first applied in flight deck operations before being applied in air traffic control. Threat and error management, or TEM, is a process for identifying safety risks in the environment, analyzing those risks, and minimizing or mitigating those risks. In November 2016, the NTSB issued Safety Recommendation A-16-51, asking the FAA to provide initial and recurrent training for air traffic controllers on controller judgment, vigilance, and/or safety awareness, with specific reference to 2 mid-air collisions that occurred in 2015. In July 2017, the FAA responded that instruction on threat and error management was being delivered to controllers as part of 2017 instructor-led recurrent training and would be required training for future controllers. A review of training records for controllers involved in the accident did not indicate that they received TEM training in 2017, nor were controllers familiar with the term threat and error management during post-accident interviews. TEM training can strengthen situation awareness, promote team communication, emphasize effective scanning habits, help in recognizing patterns and developing adverse events, and enhance decision-making under stress. TEM training would also benefit controllers performing supervisory duties who are responsible for overseeing facility operations and making operational decisions, such as when to combine or decombine control positions. Staff have proposed one recommendation to the FAA in this area. When making operational decisions, supervisors must balance safety and risk management with the operational demands of the facility. The DCA ATC Tower Standard Operating Procedures did not provide guidance or make a tool available to support supervisors in identifying risks, analyzing the impact of risks, prioritizing risks based on the likelihood and impact, or developing strategies to reduce or eliminate risks. A real-time risk assessment or decision-making tool would have likely benefited the operations supervisor in identifying and mitigating the operational risk factors that were present on the night of the accident. Staff have proposed one recommendation to the FAA in this area. Thank you. Dr. Kayagil will now continue with his presentation.
Good morning. I will discuss post-accident drug and alcohol testing requirements for FAA-employed air traffic controllers. I also will discuss the post-accident drug and alcohol testing of the local controller, assistant local controller, and operations supervisor involved in this accident. FAA-employed air traffic controllers are subject to federal workplace drug and alcohol testing requirements for Department of Transportation employees. These requirements are established by DOT order and are distinct from the drug and alcohol testing regulations that apply to DOT-regulated employers, such as airlines. By DOT order, post-accident or post-incident drug and alcohol testing is required after an accident or incident that involves any of the following: a fatality, substantial damage to aircraft, vehicles, or property, required medical treatment away from the accident site, or other unsafe practices as defined by orders or regulations. Controllers are identified as being subject to required testing when their performance provides reason to believe that it may have contributed, or when their performance cannot be completely discounted as a contributing factor. By DOT order, required post-accident drug and alcohol testing must be conducted as soon as possible following an accident. Whenever possible, required post-accident drug testing must be completed within 4 hours of the accident, and required post-accident alcohol testing must be completed within 2 hours. The DOT order allows for drug testing up to 5 days after the accident, and alcohol testing up to 8 hours after the accident. The controllers in this accident underwent workplace post-accident urine drug testing about 18 to 20 hours after the accident. This testing did not find any evidence of prohibited substance use. Post-accident alcohol testing, although required, was not performed. This investigation determined that the FAA Air Traffic Organization made the drug and alcohol testing determination almost 3.5 hours after the accident. The decision was made to test for drugs only because the controllers already had been released from the facility about 15 minutes earlier. Drug testing was scheduled for the afternoon of the day after the accident. Staff found that the ATO's drug and alcohol testing determination was not sufficiently timely to meet DOT's required testing timeframes. Additionally, the ATO's decision to not conduct drug testing as soon as possible and to not conduct alcohol testing at all violated DOT requirements. The ATO's delayed and inappropriate drug and alcohol testing determination was due in part to inadequate ATO staff understanding of the DOT's requirements for timely testing. Staff also found that the ATO's initial event response procedures are inadequately designed to meet requirements for timely testing. Because the ATO procedures dictate that the drug and alcohol testing determination be made concurrently with the services rendered telephone conference. The SRT is a management review to assess air traffic services associated with an event and does not take place until after multiple time-consuming administrative and initial investigative actions, including notifying and convening various personnel and preparing audio communications and radar display information for playback. Staff have proposed 2 recommendations to the FAA and 1 to the DOT in this area. This concludes my presentation, and we are now ready to answer your questions.
Thank you all very much. Thank you, Mr. Banning, and certainly Mr. Soper, Dr. Wilson, and Dr. Kaigal for your excellent and thorough presentations. As I mentioned at the outset, there's a lot of information in the report, substantially more information than we're able to present in even a day's time. So we have had the pleasure of reviewing your work, in the draft, and appreciate that. I have a question. I have a lot of questions in this area, but one I want to start with. Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport opened in 1941. Runway 1533 was part of the airport's original configuration since it opened. The Baltimore-Washington helicopter route chart was published in 1986, maybe went through one small change to add a compulsory reporting point around Wilson Bridge. Between 1991 and the time of the accident, there had been changes to route altitudes and police zone boundaries, but not any substantial changes to the route. You mentioned that the routes were never designed to ensure separation in your presentation. Yet we know over time, concerns were raised repeatedly, went unheard, squashed, however you want to put it, stuck in red tape and bureaucracy of a very large organization, somehow didn't make it up. Repeated recommendations over the years, so much so that DC Tower took it upon themselves to create a helicopter working group because they had concerns. How is it that no one, absolutely no one, in the FAA did the work to figure out there was only 75 feet, at best, 75 feet of vertical separation between a helicopter on Route 4 and an airplane landing on runway 33? How is it nobody, until we did this investigation?
That's a great question, and we've asked the same question amongst staff, and that's precisely why we have recommended the assessment of these helicopter routes, not just what was there at the time, but everything that exists today for this airport. They've conducted others, but we're focused on this one right here, so we have recommended that in our recommendations.
Yeah, in fact, in our findings of our urgent recommendation report, we stated existing separation distances between helicopter traffic operating on Route 4 and aircraft landing on runway 33 are insufficient and pose an intolerable risk to aviation safety by increasing the chances of a mid-air collision. I'm going to ask Mr. Banning and Mr. LeBaron, your pilots, is there anywhere in our airspace that 75 feet of vertical separation is acceptable?
I'd say not to me, as a pilot.
Yeah, not that I'm aware of.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. But it wasn't until Ms. Moeller and others mapped it out, thank you for your work, that we figured it out. Years of nobody listening. Opportunities too. So I'm going to ask, FAA order states that terminal operations service area directors are responsible for conducting annual reviews of existing helicopter route charts to determine their accuracy and continued do we have any evidence that these annual reviews were conducted?
No, we do not. We asked for that information, and they were unable to provide that nor identify the individual that you just named.
Right.
Since then, it has been changed to the air traffic manager responsible for those, but at the time of this event, it was that individual that you named, and we have no evidence of any of it.
Do we even know who the terminal, so we have no idea who the Terminal Operations Service Area Director is for the Baltimore-Washington helicopter route chart? That was the requirement, and the person responsible for conducting these annual reviews at that time.
That's correct. We do not know, and as of 2 days ago, the FAA responded in the same manner. They did not either.
The FAA had no idea who a terminal, Terminal Operations Service Area Director was. Who was responsible for conducting annual reviews, ensuring the safety of helicopters transiting the airspace around DCA. No idea who that was. Yeah. So we invited an individual to our hearing from the mapping office to our investigative hearing to discuss the route, to discuss annual reviews and discuss any sort of proposal. Turns out, we learned after the hearing, she wasn't the right person to invite. We should have invited this Terminal Operations Service Area Director that nobody at FAA could figure out who that was. Was FAA a party to this hearing?
Yes, they were.
What is required of parties to the hearing when we come to a hearing? For example, are they part of the planning of the hearing, and would they go through the witnesses and list of witnesses with us and possibly be required to identify when we have the wrong witness?
Absolutely. Their responsibility is to advise us on the correct witness for the correct subject area.
Did FAA raise this with us at all, that this was not the right person to question at the time?
They did not. They actually provided this person to us.
They provided this person to us that could not answer any of our questions at the hearing regarding annual reviews, probably because they had no idea who a Terminal Operations Service Area Director was. Thank you. That runs out my 5 minutes, so turning to member, I am so sorry, Mike Graham.
It's been a long few weeks, hasn't it? I'd like to direct these questions to Mr. Soper, and I'm going to ask you some questions about the primary duties and responsibilities for the different control positions in the control tower as they relate to the DCA ATC tower information outlined in their SOP. As a former controller yourself, I want you to share your perspective on which duty or responsibility is most important for each of the following positions. What would that be for the local controller?
According to the DCA's SOP, Air Traffic Control Tower's SOP, the local controller must provide initial separation between successive departures and arrivals, and provide separation between arrivals and departures in those aircraft operating under their jurisdiction airspace.
That's their primary duty.
Yes.
How about the helicopter controller?
The helicopter control, according to the SOP, is to separate VFR traffic from the DCA arrivals and departures or fixed wing traffic, issue safety alerts and traffic advisories as required, and to clear VFR aircraft on routes or into zones as depicted on the Baltimore-Washington helicopter route chart.
How about the assistant local controller?
They are there exactly like you might think, to alert the local controller or assist and alert the local controller of any unusual situations or developing traffic conflicts, maintain surveillance of the local traffic pattern and landing areas, and utilize visual memory aids when required to help them not miss anything, and assist the local control in monitoring aircraft in their airspace as well as on the CTRD or the control tower radar display.
And how about the primary duty and responsibility for the operations supervisor?
The operations supervisor provides operational supervision and directs the tower operation to ensure an efficient flow of air traffic, making necessary notifications of suspected operational errors, pilot deviations, near mid-air collision reports, other incidents requiring notifications, combining and decombining of positions in accordance with criteria outlined in their SOP.
Thank you. Can you share a brief summary of how the decision was supposed to be made according to the SOP in effect at the time of the accident to combine or decombine the local and helicopter control positions?
Yes, in the SOP, it outlined that the supervisor or controller in charge at their discretion, though it stated, let me start out first with, it stated that the helicopter position must normally be decombined. So normally it should be decombined during these core hours, period. If the supervisor or CIC has a need to combine or decombine, if they were already combined, the positions there to consider, they have a list of 7 things, which I can list here for you: the weather conditions, VIP movements, special helicopter operations, training initiatives, staffing constraints, air carrier traffic volume, helicopter traffic volume within the DCA Class Bravo. So when making a decision to combine or decombine, they should be taking all of these into account.
And who makes that decision to combine or decombine?
At that time, it was the operations supervisor.
Okay. If they were to decombine it, which they were not at the time of the accident, did they have enough personnel on the tower to do it?
They did.
They did. Okay. So based on the procedures and the present staffing levels in the tower, with 12 aircraft total on frequency in the 90 seconds leading up to the accident, as well as the steady stream of helicopter traffic in the airspace all evening, in your opinion, should the local and helicopter control positions had been decombined at the time of the accident?
Staff looked at this very closely, and we agree that we believe they should have been decombined in accordance with their manual, however softly it may have been written, and that we focused some recommendations actually in this area because we're concerned about that combining of positions.
Right. One last question. I know there's a good discussion of this in the draft report of the operations supervisor's extended time on position without a break. And I think Dr. Wilson had talked about this. Based on your investigation, are there any other factors you see as potentially playing a role in the operations supervisor's loss of situational awareness and the reduction in their ability to proactively assess the risk posed by the traffic and the environmental conditions at the time of the accident?
We looked at a number of factors that could have impacted his performance, or his awareness on duty that day, but we really felt that his extended time on position was the reason that he had the decreased vigilance and attentiveness.
And was there anything looked at as the amount of time that they had been at that facility?
Could you clarify what you mean by that?
That supervisor, how long had they been at that facility and making their tenure there? That's okay. I'm past my time.
I understand what you're saying. So yeah, he was a relatively new operations supervisor, and one of the recommendations that we have, particularly for the threat and error management, is we think that would have benefited him on making better decisions that day as well.
But they had prior experience as a controller, correct?
Yes, he did. He was new to being an operations supervisor, but had been a controller for some time.
Okay, thank you.
Member Inman.
Kat, I want to follow up just a little bit on that, because you mentioned threat and error management. We made this recommendation in 2016 based on something we had seen, and the response we got was, yes, we're going to do it, and all new controllers are going to get it. We were promised that this was happening, right?
We were.
Did they do it?
When we reviewed the training records for the controllers involved, we did not see that they received the integrated safety training workshop, which included threat and error management training. We did see that the operations supervisor did have a workshop of that same name several years, a couple of years before, and then a new hire who was working on position, not one of the controllers involved, he had a workshop in, I believe, 2023 with that same name. but that was the only evidence that we had of that workshop being provided to any of the controllers on duty.
So you just mentioned 2 people?
Yes.
And there were 21 that were assigned to the tower?
We only looked at the training records for the controllers that were involved the night of the accident.
Okay. But obviously, what we were told that has happened and was occurring did not actually occur.
We don't have evidence that it occurred.
It's okay, I can say that. Thanks, Kat.
The answer's no.
It's kind of like congressional testimony. I'll get you there eventually. Dr. Cahill, you mentioned about alcohol and drug testing, and I know we don't know or don't believe that it may have played a role in this, but it's obviously a violation and something we've looked at many times before. Is that correct?
This is not the first time that we've seen it, and you're correct. We did not find any evidence that this was an issue in this accident, but we did address it as a safety issue in our recommendations.
So you saw the investigative hearing, correct?
Yes, sir.
And Nick Fuller testified at that point that they were aware of their shortcomings and they were going to make modifications and changes. Is that right?
That's correct. Mr. Fuller testified that the FAA was working to revise the FAA's order for initial event response procedures, which are the orders that tie the drug and alcohol determination to the services rendered telephone conference.
And do we know if they've done that yet?
As of this date, they have not published that as a revised procedure, no, sir.
Exactly. But the answer to the question is no, because I was in Louisville, Kentucky when 15 people died and they didn't test then either. So they're not learning a lesson, obviously, nor what they're telling us seems to be factual all the time. It's okay. It's a rhetorical question, Dr. Cahill. I want to go back, I guess, Mr. Soper. I asked or questioned this about putting this into the report, and I understand staff's reservation because it's considered slang. But can you tell us what squeeze play is? It was mentioned in several of controller interviews and was discussed somewhat in the reports.
Yes, so there is no definition, formal or informal, for squeeze play. It is sort of a slang term, but controllers understand it for those times when you are taking action to get a departure out in between arrivals that might be a tight space, or to fit one into an arrival sequence, and maybe in a radar situation where they're having to expedite everything and everything has to kind of work just right for it.
So I think you're describing this type of scenario that happened with 5342. Is that correct?
5342, somewhat. Yeah, it's similar to a squeeze play, yes.
So I'm kind of curious. The controller had asked them to circle so they could offload a departure. But we look back, in American 1630 was the last aircraft to be cleared for takeoff prior to the accident. And it departed 12 minutes early. They have safely arrived 25 minutes early. I guess, do the controllers know when they're prioritizing an aircraft so it can leave earlier, or should they even be aware whenever they're trying to attempt this, or are they trying to just, I know we've heard some testimony in regard to the geography at DCA, but should they be aware of that?
So they would generally not necessarily be aware if they were early. They would be aware if they had been assigned a departure time based on traffic initiatives or something where they actually get an assigned time. So in those cases, they would know they have to get this aircraft out in a particular window. As far as if an aircraft had taxied maybe a little bit early, they might see the fact that he was scheduled for departure at 2020 and he was ready for departure at 2015 or something. They might see that, but it wouldn't necessarily alarm them, or change something.
Okay, I'll wait for the next round.
Thank you. At the time the helicopter and local control positions were combined, are the communications for air traffic control all on speaker?
For local control, yes, they are. At this tower, they keep local control communications on speaker all of the time.
So the operations supervisor could hear what was being stated?
He should have been able to.
Okay. Potomac, my understanding is that at some point the operations supervisor received a phone call from Potomac Tracon requesting a reduction in miles and trail, correct?
That is correct.
And essentially what that means is to reduce spacing to allow for more arrivals.
Correct.
What does that do for the controllers?
When you start decreasing below that miles and trail that was requested or that was in for the restriction, it makes it much more difficult to get departures out in between those arrivals.
And when they accept that, is there any sort of criteria or look, or did the operations supervisor say to the local controller, hey, you know, is this okay? How do you feel about this? Or it was just approved?
We have no evidence that he asked anybody, and according to the recording, it was relatively quick. When he asked, he responded immediately that it was approved.
That it was approved. So they would reduce spacing and get more arrivals in, increasing workload for the controllers. What was the assistant local controller doing at this time?
At the time that they made the decision to...
I'm sorry, at the time of the accident, time of the collision?
So at the time of the accident, according to post-accident interviews, the assistant local controller was writing down information on helicopters.
And what is the role of the assistant local controller?
To assist the local controller in surveilling the airborne aircraft and monitoring the CTRD for conflicts and alerts.
Monitoring and helping alert?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. How was the mix of, actually, I'm going to read this from our report because I don't want to catch off guard because you don't have the full report right in front of you. But I do think it's worth noting that in our report, we state DCA is capacity constrained. Since 1991, annual air carrier tower operations increased from 175,224 to a peak of 294,312 in 2024. Over the same period, tower operations attributable to air taxi and general aviation declined substantially. Air taxi operations peaked in 2007 at 118,228 operations, but fell to 1,594 operations in 2024. General aviation operations declined sharply after 2001 from 32,286 to fewer than 3,000 operations per year in every subsequent year. Air taxi, GA, meaning general aviation, and military operations accounted for 43.8% of all fixed-wing instrument flight rules operations in 2007, but only 1.3% by 2025. This change also altered the mix of traffic operating at DCA, with smaller airplanes increasingly replaced by larger air carrier category aircraft. Because larger, heavier airplanes have more restrictive performance margins on DCA's shorter runways, demand for runways 119, the airport's longest runway, increased. What did this change in the mix of traffic do did this increase workload for the tower and any sort of coordination demands for local and ground controllers?
It certainly did. We've documented in the report that as we mentioned earlier, even in my presentation, they have the busiest single runway in the National Airspace System, and what you just explained is precisely why.
And they were using runway 33 to offload some of that traffic in order to get more in and to deal with some spacing, including other measures like tromboning and other things which we could talk about later. But my point is, this did increase workload, and did anyone in the FAA ever say, hey, maybe we should look at how things have changed at DCA?
We have found no evidence of that and have made recommendations directly to that.
Yeah, well, I wonder if they actually looked at any other airspace or major airports in the U.S. With that, Member Graham.
Thank you, Chair. I think these are for you, Mr. Soper. How often are airport arrival rates reviewed?
According to FAA procedure, they should be reviewed annually every February.
Okay. And what factors go into those reviews to determine if an arrival rate needs to be reduced?
I'm going to look at my notes real quick.
No problem.
So there is a list, and that's why I knew I wanted to look at my notes. I had this list handy because I thought this may come up. So they look at a list of things that they have listed: intersecting arrival, departure runways, distance between arrival runways, dual purpose runways, for when they share arrivals and departures to the same runway. Land and hold shortened utilization, availability of high-speed taxiways, airspace limitations and constraints, procedural limitations for missed approach protection, noise abatement, et cetera, taxiway layouts, and meteorological conditions all should be considered.
And all those factors in context with DCA, would you say that every one of those factors was in play with the arrival rate at DCA?
I think our staff concluded that it does not appear that, and we have focused recommendation for that very thing.
Okay,
because we think it needs to be reviewed.
Can I ask for Table 18 to be pulled up? And as I do that, I know it's going to take a few minutes. I got a couple other questions before that. What was DCA's arrival rate at the time of the accident in VFR conditions?
36 at the time of the accident.
Okay. Did the FAA lower DCA's arrival rate in the years leading up to this accident?
There had been temporary lowerings of their arrival rate, but nothing's permanent.
Were there requests made to the FAA to lower the arrival rate at DCA prior to this accident?
Yes.
Okay. Can you explain in detail the request that was made to the FAA to lower the arrival rate, and when that was made, and who made it, and why did they make it?
Yes, in May of 2023, actually, as we heard in our investigative hearing, and we spoke to this individual as well as part of our post-accident investigations, the air traffic manager from Potomac Tricon submitted a request to lower the arrival rate, specifically due to the fleet mix change that had occurred over the years, and the fact that it didn't appear the arrival rate had been reviewed in quite some time, as well as the challenges they were having with miles and trail and being able to provide adequate miles and trail, and the limited constraints they have on the surface area there. It was getting difficult to be able to keep up, so they submitted a request to lower the arrival rate at that time.
And how did the FAA respond?
We were unable to locate the final, but ultimately they did nothing in response to that.
What's the arrival rate today after the accident?
It is 30 today.
Okay, so they lowered it now, but they didn't in 2023 after the request.
Correct, and it has fluctuated since the accident.
You got Table 18, please put that up there. As you can see there. This is the percentage of flight offloaded per year to runway 33 when landing in the northbound configuration. Is that correct?
I'm not sure. It's not that they necessarily the numbers that were offloaded, but it is the percent of usage of runway 33 in total operations.
You see it's used a little less now. Can you explain why?
Absolutely. I mean, that's the fleet mix that we keep talking about, different type of aircraft. Less aircraft can take that runway because of its shorter distance.
Okay. I know you had are there any other ways that a controller can offload going to runway 1 other than runway 33?
Sure, there are mitigations that a controller can apply, whether it's speed adjustments, some sequencing. They can even give turns. I know the chair mentioned tromboning, which is something that occurs out in the radar airspace, but turns and speed adjustments can, but they're not as effective. So they use 33 most often because it works very well.
Okay. And I know you had a very good presentation on the slot program and the front end loading and back end loading and all that. My final question for this round here is, if we put this all together, what impact does a higher arrival rate than an airport can sustain, less alternatives to offload traffic due to larger aircraft, and compressed airline scheduling have on air traffic controllers?
It increases all of their workload and increases risk.
And it also makes them have to do squeeze plays and make it work?
A lot of mitigation activities.
Okay, thank you.
Member Inman.
So in that regard, we heard some testimony earlier that the local controllers stated they were a little overwhelmed about 15 minutes before the actual crash. But then we also heard that 90 seconds before the volume had actually increased. How does a controller get out of that situation?
The controller could have asked to have the positions decombined.
And I guess from a practical point of view, you've got people that are in the tower working at that moment, and then you've got people that are in a break room that are several floors below. Is that correct?
Correct.
So if I'm in 90 seconds, my volume picks up, and I say I need help, how long is it going to take to get somebody up there to help them?
It could take minutes. But he could also rely on the assistant local control and also the operations supervisor to act as extra set of eyes and to assist in any way that they could in terms of monitoring traffic until somebody could get up there for relief.
But the assistant local controller was already supposed to be the other set of eyes, right?
She was an extra set of eyes, yes. Had she known that the controller was overloaded and needed help, she also could have potentially stopped writing down helicopter information and also started monitoring traffic for him if he felt that there was an area that she needed to focus on.
And in this case, the role of that supervisor is to be monitoring all of this. Is that correct?
Yes.
So what role did they have in monitoring this? They were on station for 4 hours, and I know we kind of talked about that, but in this case, the supervisor should be the one who starts to realize it before anyone else, right?
Yes, which is why we've recommended the threat and error management training, which we believe would help with that, as well as a risk assessment tool that they can use in real time.
So is that supervisor one that actually received it out of the 5?
He received a workshop with that same name a year or two before. I think it was 2014. So it was technically before the 2017 response that we had from the FAA. So we don't know what was included in his 2014 training.
And so it sounds like he's been around for a long time.
He was hired in 2011.
Okay. I guess how does someone monitor whether a supervisor is actually actively supervising?
There would be no one there, I guess, in real time monitoring the supervisor.
So there's no real way of knowing that these supervisors are actively engaging unless it's brought up in other reviews. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. I'm going to go to and this is for a reference for later, and I've got a reference that we can pull up, but I don't know if we need it. I think, Brian, 14 CFR 91.123, whenever it talks about ATC clearance obtained. Great, thank you. It says no pilot in command may deviate from that clearance unless an amended clearance is obtained and an emergency exists or the deviation is in response to a traffic alert and collision avoidance system resolution advisory. So I guess my question is, in that regard, we're going to talk about TCAS and ADSB later, but in this instance, if they had gotten some type of warning, the pilots, could they have made any change? Or does it have to be what ATC actually tells them?
Now, the pilot is always in final command of the aircraft, and in that case, I think we're talking about a traffic advice or a collision avoidance alert to them with a resolution advisory, and in that case, it meets that exactly where they will respond to that and they can break away from that clearance.
Okay, and we may get to that in the next section. Do we know what the ATC scope showed at the time that this incident occurred? Because I know we've had discussions about whether it rounds up and rounds down.
Yes, air traffic altitudes displayed on radar are rounded to the nearest 100 feet. And at the time of the closest time to impact that we can see there, the helicopter was shown at 300 and the CRJ was shown at 200. Or, no, wait a minute, I got that wrong, hold on. Let me check that. They were both 3, it was 3 and 4, right? We can look and check on that, but essentially we believe that the CRJ showed above the helicopter, but the helicopter climbed right just before impact. It showed a climb from 200 to 300. I do know that.
Okay, so we can go on the next round. You can maybe answer that for me if that's okay.
Yes.
Okay, great. I want to, I've been asked a lot about staffing. Obviously, we felt that you determined the tower was adequately staffed, though Certainly the workload was significant, given positions were combined. But I do want to provide, I asked the staff to check, based on September 29th, 2025 versus, today. I think we looked at January 5th, 2026, and what those numbers were. And I'm just going to go for, certainly there are more authorized positions, but I think I'm going to focus on who was operational, meaning numbers of people available to work that are working in the tower, not what's authorized, but that are working on the tower. And so, by my, the draft report shows for certified professional controllers on January 29th, operational was 25. Today, 20. Traffic management coordinators, they had 2, today 0. Operational. Operations supervisors, 4 on that date today, or as of January 5th, 3 operational. Operations managers, 1 on January 29, 2025. Just a few weeks ago, 2. Support manager, 1 at that time, now 2. Air traffic manager, still at 1 temporary, was what existed on January 29, 2025. Today, still 1 temporary. Staff support specialists, although authorized to have 3, there are 0. So by my calculations, you actually have a lower number of personnel today that are operational in the tower than existed on January 29th. It's not a question, it's just we provide that in the report, and so we're not going to talk about it, but I want to make sure that folks are aware of that. Certainly there are several trainees in the process, but we are at a lower number than we are today that are operational. With respect to the facility level, I do want to get into that. Talk about a little bit on, it was a level 10 facility, now it's a level 9. Why was it changed?
It was due to a change in the way they computed traffic counts.
So they had traffic counts for Potomac Tracon, they had traffic counts for the tower, which included helicopters. And at some point they said, you know what, we're going to give all those counts to Potomac Tracon. We're going to take it away from DC Tower. Once they took those counts away, the level decreased to a 9.
That is correct, and Potomac's increased to a 12.
And Potomac's increased to a 12. Here's my question. Is there a difference between the traffic that Potomac Tracon handles and the amount of traffic DCA Tower handles, or is it the same traffic?
They're still operating the same traffic in the same manner they were prior to the change.
Exactly. So this change was made, they downgrade the facility. Obviously, you're talking about things like cost of living and other things like that. But from a safety standpoint, how does that decreasing a facility, a tower level, decrease safety? How does it impact safety?
As we mentioned in the report, the biggest thing that happens there is they cannot attract the experience or get the talent into the facility that is needed to run a very complex air traffic control operation.
This is the most complex airspace, one of the most, in the entire United States. And I'm not minimizing the experience of tower personnel at DCA Tower, but if you're going to attract personnel and have the most highly experienced personnel, you want a higher level facility. Why? Because they're paid by facility level. So the higher facility number, the more pay you get. In this case, everyone in the tower knows this tower is essentially treated as a training facility. You come in, you do a little bit of time, then you go out after you get your time because you want to go get paid at a level 10, 11, 12 facility. So it is a pass-through. They can't attract people here, which is a problem, and which is why we're making some recommendations on that. Member Graham.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Soper, is there a minimum distance between converging aircraft where a controller can approve a request for pilot-applied visual separation, or do controllers have the latitude to approve requests for the pilot-applied visual separation whenever they deem appropriate?
So when a controller is going to approve the application of visual separation, they must have approved required standard separation prior to that. So in the case of DCA, they're a Class Bravo airspace between a helicopter and a VFR helicopter and an IFR fixed wing. They would be required to have 1.5 miles of separation or 500 feet vertical separation, and before up until the point they approve visual separation.
Okay. And so after the pilot-applied visual separation is approved in a Class B airspace, you said it's the minimum step's 1.5 miles and 500 feet, correct?
Not after it's
vertically
approved, prior to approving it. Once it's approved, then it becomes the pilot's responsibility for that distance.
Is there a distance in there that if they decrease that range, that's something the controller has to do at that point?
No.
Okay. So when would a controller make a safety alert?
Anytime the controller observes an aircraft that they believe to be in unsafe proximity to terrain or another aircraft.
And there's not a designated distance or vertical separation for that, is that correct?
That is correct.
That's correct, okay. What does a safety alert entail?
Safety alert would include the words, in a case of between two aircraft, it would be the words traffic alert, followed by an appropriate traffic advisory, followed by a alternate course of action if feasible, and then the word immediately.
Should these two aircraft in this accident have received a safety alert?
Yes, we've stated that in ours, or in the report, that the controller should have issued a safety, would have been the most appropriate thing at that time.
Okay. Switch here a little bit. There was a lot of impacts on the higher arrival rate coming into DCA, changing fleet mix. We talked about compressed airline scheduling practices, the controllers and their ability or inability to continue following SOPs in order to make it work. Would you agree that one of the consequences of the cumulative effect was the deviations in traffic calls, phraseology, application of visual separation, call signs, radiocom, training records, the list goes on, and other issues that had become standard and were identified in multiple external compliance verifications of DCA air traffic control tower?
I think I understand your question, and I would say that we've outlined in the report, and staff believes that the continually increased workload for many reasons, whether you're talking about from the traffic to the combining of positions inappropriately to whatever at the time, we believe that led to the ability for a lot of deficiencies to occur, or operating, as we heard during the investigative hearing, the operations manager said specifically we're operating on that borderline of safety regularly. So we made recommendations, obviously focused in that area.
Okay, so do you think the controllers at DCA had fallen into a state of relying on pilot-applied visual separation as a crutch, despite its many well-known and well-documented shortcomings?
Staff does believe that there was an over-reliance on the use of visual separation as a means of providing separation for aircraft and moving aircraft through the airspace so regularly.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. And finally, the last communication between the controller and PAT 25, was that an appropriate safety alert?
It was not a safety alert by definition, but it was an attempt at the time to deconflict.
Thank you.
Thank you. Member Inman.
You have an answer for me, Ryan? Or you haven't maybe had a chance? Sorry.
I do have an answer for you. According to the STARS maintenance replay, the PSA Flight 5342 was at 400 and PAT 25 was at 200. The moment targets merged, we had 400 and 300.
And so the controller, if they were looking at their scope, would have seen that, at least indicated on the scope, that it was 100 feet or approximately 100 feet, depending on the averaging of the recommended route maximum altitude?
Well, it had actually been at 200 feet for a brief time there where he was at 200 right up until he was at 300, then 200 for a little bit, and then came up to 3 right when targets merged.
Okay. So, and that would have made a conflict alert, correct?
The conflict alert was active at that time, yes.
So I think in your research, I believe in the 30 minutes prior to this accident, we have 18 controller radio transmission where a conflict alert is going off. Does that sound accurate?
It is accurate.
And that actually was, it appears to be 5 separate interactions that were occurring.
We had, well, not for the full 30 minutes. We were only able to get replay information for 18 minutes prior, but in the 18 minutes leading up to it, there were 5 separate instances of conflict alert that resulted in 9 times there was a transmission with it in the background. You could hear it.
So in that 18 minutes, there were that many times, and that would have been heard in the entire tower cab?
Yes.
So I go back to the supervisor. If they're hearing a number of conflict alerts continually happening, should they not take action to say, is this a trend, or is this just become a nuisance and they just avoid it?
They should, and I think that's exactly why, as Dr. Wilson has mentioned previously, we specifically have a rec in this area there's a potential for complacency to happen or for nuisance alerts, and to try to fix that, we have a recommendation to actually adjust the conflict alert system logic.
We actually took we visited the tower last month. I know Member Graham and I did, and tried to see it in almost the exact same moonlight that was occurring on the night of the accident. Can I take you back to that? And
yes.
The question I have, and it was on the simulation that was being done, and the pictures indicated these monitors that were hanging from the ceiling. And if you look very closely, as you look at the converging paths, it's almost that the monitors are blocking the ability to see, depending on how high or short or tall you are. Is that a problem in just a tower configuration issue?
We looked at that, and actually I'm going to let Dr. Wilson speak to that because she has some information in that area.
I think it's just important to note that those monitors are movable, so they can be adjusted. And also when we talked to the controllers who were on duty, everyone said that they had no issue identifying both aircraft, that there were no limitations in them being able to see. So they didn't feel that the monitors were in a position that blocked their view from monitoring both aircraft.
Okay. And during that tour, Brian, did we talked about whether the morale and the staffing had increased, or at least the perception of the training for that tower, correct?
Yes.
During that discussion, did we hear anything about any other towers that might be having the same issues that DCA was having at the time of the crash?
I don't recall specific ones, but I do remember maybe 1 or 2 of the people from the FAA just kind of socializing that there's several, there's facilities across the NASA experiencing staffing problems and training deficiencies and the ability to staff appropriately.
Yeah, I think that's my concern, as we were talking about. They may be getting the time and attention and the training, but is there other places in the United States? Are we going to sit here 5 years from now and say the data was there 5 years ago? Because we know now the data, the people were raising the concerns. People were saying this was dangerous 5, 10 years ago, and nobody was really listening. My concern is this somewhere else in the country, and do we know that they're getting the proper resources?
Our hope, staff's hope, is the recommendations that we have in these specific areas will not just be focused on DCA, and the air traffic organization will organically look at that and say we need to look everywhere because it does apply.
How's their track record been in the past? Come on, Brian, this is your chance.
Not great.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. I actually want to ask along the lines of where Member Inman was, because I do have this question about the operations supervisor. It was on speaker, all the conversations. I mean, all the communications going back and forth. He took a call to then reduce essentially miles and trail and approve that reduction by Potomac Tracon. And I want to point out, you know, something in our report. In the 20 minutes before the accident, the total number of aircraft the local controller was handling fluctuated between 7 and 12. At about 10 to 15 minutes beforehand, he said he was feeling a little overwhelmed. The operations supervisor said it was totally fine, no problem. I was a little bit surprised by that. I mean, even if you have procedures in place on decombining, you've got, how do you even capture to one person, he's fine, to that local controller who's busy, 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 and maybe doesn't have 2 seconds to say, hey, let's deconflict, while the operations supervisor is listening to all of this. Everybody in the tower is hearing it. I mean, how is that not complacency? I mean, we talk about reduced alertness and vigilance, but I raised this earlier about, is it complacency? You just mentioned complacency, actually, Mr. Soper, in your answer to Member Inman.
I do agree. I do believe, and I mean, I think that staff believes there was complacency occurring in that tower on some level. But again, not to keep going back to them, but that's actually the primary reason for our focused recommendation in the area of giving them the tools that they should need, the requirement to log when they combine positions. So there's some sort of accountability and tools available to the supervisor to be able to make better decisions and understand what their true responsibilities are while they're there, instead of just kind of, here you go, you got it. He had received very little supervisory training, from what was documented from the FAA, to prepare him for that job. And so we made recommendations there. We hope would improve that.
Well, I think when we get to those findings and recommendations, I may have some more questions on that. You talked about, Member Graham had asked about what are essentially merging target procedures, where you do issue a safety alert. At what point, and Member Graham had asked about a communication, you know, at first it was, do you have visual on that? Do you have visual on that CRJ? First of all, that you can't distinguish between a CRJ 700 and anything else in the dark with night vision goggles at that point. But at 8:47 and 41.9 seconds, the communication of pass behind the CRJ was made.
Yes.
Okay, so 8:47:41, then the collision is 8:47:59, so we've got about 18 seconds in between. Is that when that safety alert, should that safety alert been issued instead of pass behind the CRJ? Is that when, I'm asking when that should have been issued?
So from the stuff there, the time in which the safety alert should have been issued was when he first asked him, do you still have that CRJ in sight?
Okay, so 8:47:39 seconds. So that does that provides about 20 seconds.
Yes.
Okay. My last question is, given that apparently no one we interviewed was aware of routine close encounters of helicopters other than people in the tower, was any organization in your opinion, effectively monitoring the potential for the risk of a mid-air collision between military helicopters and civilian aircraft in that area?
I believe that's going to be discussed with some depth in the third panel today.
In the third panel.
Yes,
we'll go with that back in the third panel, and Dr. Price, thank you for that. Okay. Do you have any additional questions? You have one more. Member Graham.
let's talk about the supervisor at the time. This was brought up about the situational awareness. What did they say in the interview when asked about how many helicopters they thought were on frequency at the time?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, the supervisor only recalled one helicopter.
But yeah, leading up to it, there were 5.
It varied between,
Three and 5.
3 and 5.
Considerably different. Yeah, the loss of situational awareness, I'd say. Thank you, that's all I have.
Member Inman?
I've got just a little bit of follow-up, and I'm going to go back to the helicopter route structure itself. And this was a little bit baffling to me that we got so many different answers from the FAA. Is there a maximum altitude for a helicopter route?
Yes, they do have maximum altitudes published on the chart, as we found.
Then why did their testimony say it was only recommended?
Because they had conflicting information on the helicopter route chart, as we outlined in the report, and produced recommendations to hopefully correct that. In one place it said altitudes are recommended, and then in another place it said altitudes are maximum.
Where I'm from, that's called talking out of both sides of your mouth.
Right. And I mean, just to add on to that, the letters of agreement with all of the helicopter operators are clear that the altitude maximum is what they are being cleared at. They are to maintain that altitude through the airspace. That's their Class Bravo clearance, actually.
Okay. And the same thing in this route structure. I continue to be amazed as we learn more about it. How can the Coast Guard tell me the exact depth of every piece of terrain that's on the Potomac, and yet someone tells us that this route is drawn with a Sharpie on one side and a riverbank on the other?
Again, we do have recommendations to that effect too, because of the vagueness of that routing, or to at least explain better so operators understand fully what their responsibilities and restrictions are.
And I guess I'll go to Bryce if you don't mind, just because of being a pilot, not going to let you off that easy. Is it not concerning that, I mean, you have 16,000 hours, I think?
About 8,000.
Sorry, doubled it. It's a long time ago. 8,000 hours. Is everything usually very precision in regard to not only landing, approach plates, everything is lined out with GPS, exactly where you have to be when you're on the bug, IFR? Is that not just a science that's defined?
Yeah, in the instrument flying world, it is very regulated, and yes, and it was disturbing to see that these helicopter routes had no lateral boundaries, and the confusion on the charts with regard to altitudes.
So it was set up for failure just by the administration of what they were telling aviators?
It was most certainly not clear, and there was a misunderstanding about what those routes also provided, which we'll, I think, discuss in more detail in another panel.
That's all I got for this one.
Thank you. Just a few for me. Dr. Kayagil, why is it important? You know, obviously, we were not concerned about anybody having been impaired by alcohol. We didn't think that was the case here. But, you know, time and time again, they're not doing testing. It wasn't just the UPS crash in Kentucky, but it was Austin, Texas, any number of investigations that we've conducted where time and again they're not doing testing. Why is it important to do testing?
Well, doing testing provides us with investigative information, obviously, but beyond any single investigation, a primary intent of drug and alcohol testing is to identify and deter use of certain prohibitive substances, as well as abuse of alcohol, with the recognition that that can impair performance of safety and security sensitive duties. So anytime you have a systemic barrier to this getting done on a regular basis, routine basis as required, that's a safety issue.
It's a significant safety issue, and it's one that could be left unchecked if they are not doing the required testing.
That's correct, and that's why we have proposed several recommendations to try and close this loop and make sure that this testing that's required is actually being done.
At the hearing, Mr. Fuller had stated, well, they didn't do testing because no one was in the tower. Mr. Soper, how long after the collision was somebody in the tower from FAA?
Within minutes.
18 minutes
Yes.
specifically.
Yes.
He also stated that they weren't quite sure there were any fatalities, and that drug and alcohol testing was required when they can confirm fatalities. We know that's not the only. Was it clear there was substantial damage? Was anyone unclear that there was substantial damage? Anyone?
I think beyond what's obvious in this case, the important thing to point out, as you say, is fatalities were not necessary for testing to be required.
That's right. That's correct. I have one last question for Mr. Soper or Mr. Banning, whoever wants to respond to this. We have significant traffic changes over time. We have no one who reviewed the routes. We have routes designed that were not designed to ensure separation. No safety reviews. We have arrival rates increasing. We have reductions in miles and trail, including reductions in miles and trail that night, which reduced spacing. We have less and less alternatives where controllers are using other measures to deal with getting increasing planes arrivals in due to pressure, offloading onto runway 33, reducing speeds. We have increased workload. We have a supervisor. We have all of this that was on speaker. We have a supervisor who didn't take action and then improved less spacing, more arrivals. We have an assistant local controller who had diverted attention to writing down something on helicopters at the time. And we have an entire tower who took it upon themselves to try to raise concerns over and over and over and over again, only to get squashed by management and everybody above them within FAA. Were they set up for failure?
Panel 3 is going to hit this nail on the head.
I'm asking you.
They were not adequately prepared to do the jobs they were assigned to do.
Great. Thank you very much. All right, that concludes our first portion of presentations and board member questions. And we are going to go to a 15-minute break. If we could come back at 12. We'll come back at 12. We'll start again at 12. Thank you.